Stand and sing, O Zambia, proud and free, land of wake and joy in unity, victors in the struggle for their right. We've won freedom's fight, all one, strong and free. Africa is our own motherland, fashioned with and blessed by God's good hand. Let us call her people, join as one, brothers under the sun, all one, strong and free. One land and one nation is our cry. Dignity and peace need Zambia's sky. Like a noble eagle in its flight, Zambia, praise to thee. Oh, one, strong and free. Praise be to God. Praise be, praise be. Bless our great nation, Zambia, Zambia. Free men we stand under the flag of our land, Zambia. Praise to thee, oh one, strong and free.
The Director General, Anti Corruption Commission, to give welcome remarks.
Have you managed to find this guy?
But I got his number.
Go and click on him.
That's the on the podium.
Yeah, no, the guy in the map, the moderator.
Okay.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you. I hope indeed get the message from the Director General Anti Corruption Commission welcoming us to this event. Without taking much of the time, allow me to.
Sorry, can you click this?
This can work.
Yeah, it's for the online platform.
Without taking much of your time, allow me to invite the chapter president, Transparency International Zambia, Mrs. Priscilla Chikonde Chansa, to also give her remarks.
The guest of honor, Secretary to the Cabinet, Mr. Patrick Kandwa, the SEC Board Chairperson, Honorable Justice Ivanka Maunde retired, the SEC Director General, Mrs. Daphne Chabo, the representatives from the Swedish Embassy, the representatives from GIZ, the consultant, civil society representatives, the academia, the media. May I simply say, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to give this address to you at the launch of the 2024 Zambia Bribe Payers Index, the ZBPI, which is one of Transparency International Zambia's flagship pieces of evidence. TIZ and the Anti Corruption Commission have collaborated on this since the 2024 ZBPI and have for a long time continued to collaborate in the fight against corruption in Zambia. In the quest to ensure effectiveness, and evidence-based anti-corruption studies such as this one has immensely contributed to the design of focused anti-corruption interventions to curb the scourge. TIZ and SEC have periodically gathered evidence to determine the corruption situation in the country, refine anti-corruption tools and interventions, and propose institutional reforms to government as a contribution to enhancing governance and public service delivery. The ZBPI has been one of the contributing surveys towards this evidence. Historically, this survey is conducted every other year, except years when there are significant events in the country that could affect the process, such as the general elections. Ladies and gentlemen, the ZBPI is a corruption measurement tool that measures the probability of public service seekers or users experiencing bribe-seeking behavior from a service provider in a specific public and private sector institution and incidences of bribe offer thereof. The ZBPI also provides a public perceptual and experiential observations of government, stakeholder and corruption actions, and the state of bribery in the country. The overall objective of the ZBPI is to generate empirical anti-corruption data that helps anti-corruption stakeholders implement interventions that respond to the fight against corruption in Zambia. This is achieved by undertaking a countrywide survey based on the objectives and the theme of the ZBPI. In addition, the findings of the ZBPI input in the assessment of government's commitment to the fight against corruption in the National Development Plan. The theme for the 2024 ZBPI survey is corruption in the decentralization process, with a focus on the Constituency Development Fund implementation. That's the CDF. Within this theme, the survey considered, among others, knowledge of CDF, community participation in CDF, transparency and accountability in CDF implementation, and incidents and other. Ladies and gentlemen, the relationship between corruption and evidence-informed policy, EIP, is mutually reinforcing one. Corruption can erode the very foundations of evidence-based decision-making, while EIP itself can be important to corruption. As such, the evidence generated from the 2024 ZBPI will help TIZ, SEC, and other anti-corruption stakeholders in identifying corruption patterns, corruption networks, and risk-prone sectors. In addition, the evidence will contribute to establishing transparency and accountability by promoting open access to information and through the continuous monitoring and evaluation of anti-corruption efforts to foster public trust. Further, the evidence will help develop evidence-informed interventions and reforms that can make anti-corruption efforts more effective, guide the adoption of global best practices, and harmonize goals, fostering worldwide cooperation against corruption. As I conclude, TIZ believes that fighting corruption demands that we strengthen and combine all our efforts for us to achieve any meaningful progress. I wish to thank and at the same time call upon our cooperating partners to join us in this important fight against corruption. Your continued support will continue helping to sharpen our advocacy and support various government institutions in their quest to make their system transparent, effective, and more accountable. I thank you.
Thank you very much, TI and Chuck, for those remarks. Next on the program is make a short poem. How ready? The poem. We'll move to the next segment, which is a presentation of the report. Great. So then we'll move to the next segment, which is the presentation of the report by consultants. Now we to invite the participant to step down and take the seats.
So you go to the other one. If there are two of them.
Hi.
Requesting for a copy of the speech she just did.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So this mic I'm giving to her, to the other person.
Yes. Since there are two of them, so each one should have a mic. Yes.
So the moderator and the speaker. It started now.
They also need to introduce my big next red bullet of this new camera in case they think I went wrong. I have a question to you. I'm always grateful to see Secretary coming here, so I'll start. We basically
Your microphone.
Another one.
Yes.
Two.
No, just you can get this one.
We'll basically proceed by, sorry, let me just go back to technology here. By giving you an idea of, which mic am I using, this one? By giving you an idea of the presentation, we hope we'll be able to go through everything that is planned. I may be a bit sketchy on the, what the Zambia Bribe Payers Survey is, because the TI president, Mrs. Chansa, already did allude to that. So we'll look at the objectives of the 2024 Zambia Bribe Payers Index survey, the summary findings, the recommendations that have been made, and we'll proceed henceforth. Just to reiterate, the Bribe Payers survey is actually corruption 2 that looks at everyday bribery experiences in terms of individuals or citizens seeking a public service from public officials in places like clinics, hospitals, education institutions, police departments, and other public agencies that are covered in the survey. It also provides an interrogation of how effective anti-corruption actions that are implemented are, the public perceptions on good governance indicators. Further, it provides an in-depth evidence on emerging corruption concerns and corruption vulnerabilities. And this is done by the introduction of the survey being thematic. Like you heard from Mrs. Chansa, the 2024 was basically corruption in the translation process with a focus on the Constituency Development Fund. We move to the objectives. There are basically 6 objectives in 2024. The first was exploring the extent of bribery and other forms of corruption in the implementation of CDF program in selected constituencies across the country. The second objective, which is the flagship of the Zambia Bribe Payers Index survey, is assess the state of bribery in selected public institutions and selected categories of the private sector. Then from the state of bribery, the findings from there, we normally derive 2 indices. That is where the generating bribery indices for public institutions comes in from the assessment of the state of bribery. Further, we identify services in selected public institutions which are more prone to bribery. We also interrogate members of the public's knowledge of corruption, where to report corruption. And in 2024, we looked at awareness of the online anonymous whistleblower systems. Actually, I did see, where's that? Oh, there's even a standing poster there. So we interrogated whether citizens or individuals are aware of this anonymous system that has been introduced. It was introduced last year. When, Timothy? April last year. We also assess the country's application of selected good governance indicators. And lastly, we provide the recommendations that arise from what we have established. So we'll start with the summary findings. And at this stage, the summary findings, we started with CDF implementation. At the point I introduce my other colleague, Mwenda, you may have to come here now. Mwenda Mumbuna is my co-consultant, and he became part of the team because of experiences in CDF implementation. He has very weird stories. I hope you remember to tell them. Mwenda. I told you. You need that cable now. I'll just continue. So what you do is you just move there. You can read from here.
Good morning. I hope everybody could hear me. Can people hear me now? Okay, thank you. It's just that now I have to lean in front to see. One of the reasons why I failed to be a Catholic priest was because I couldn't stand in front of people. So usually I put my hand in the pocket to manage my anxiety. Okay, so I'm going to present to you the CDF implementation summary findings, and I hope we have enough battery power to go through it. In the first place, Constituency Development Fund, which is referred to as CDF, was created as part of funds towards the discretionary financing to the council, especially when the National Commission for Development Planning started looking at provincial planning and also district planning. If you remember, that's the time when provincial planning units were set up, and then there were district planning units which were set up. But councils after 1991 lost most of their funding, so they didn't have much funding towards development. So there was need for the councils to, as they set up their district plans, to have some discretionary financing to implement those plans. So that's basically the short background in terms of the CDF. My presentation will look at issues to do with awareness, knowledge, participation, and also undue influence. So basically, I hope I've gone to the right slide. Okay, yeah. Awareness, knowledge of CDF, community participation CDF, communication of CDF information, and undue influence, incidents of bribery in CDF.
When are you able to read from it? All you do is just touch there. To be moving it.
Oh, okay. That's the problem when you borrow a laptop. So, in terms of awareness, this is basically from the community perspective. The awareness was considerably high, that's 86.6%. And awareness in terms of rural and urban. In the urban areas, the awareness seems to have been a little bit lower than that in the rural areas. Apologies because on the screen it's a little bit small, so I can't see properly. But there's only about a 5% difference in terms of rural and urban awareness of CDF. This is from the community perspective. In terms of awareness of the different components of CDF, in the rural areas, there was more awareness in terms of community projects as compared to the urban areas, and there is about 10 percentage difference. This mainly comes from the basis of the fact that CDF, if you look at it from its original background, one of the reasons was that it wanted to mitigate the fact that councils since 1965 were much more inclined towards servicing the urban areas than the rural areas. If you look at the schedule of council responsibilities, lighting, garbage collection, those are all urban area issues. But when CDF came in, it had a strong focus on the rural areas. So that's why you find that in the urban areas, there's more awareness of what they would like to be sorted out. Those are more only community projects. Whereas in the urban areas, the awareness is much higher in terms of youth, women, and community empowerment projects. The last part we looked at, we used the community perspectives. These are the perspectives. The next part is more of the perspectives from the CDF committees and the WDCs. The last part looked at awareness, but now we'd like to look at knowledge of CDF. There's a difference between the awareness and knowledge, whereas awareness is a basic level of knowing something, while knowledge represents more comprehensive understanding of it. It's critical that communities are more knowledgeable of CDF, because by being aware, it means that they know how to apply what kind of components, and that way they can participate more in CDF. Because one of the reasons, especially as the DG for ACC said, that CDF, the objective is also to give the communities a chance to have a say in terms of the projects they would like funded. So in terms of knowledge of CDF, rural and urban, there's a big difference in terms of the knowledge levels. There is a very high level in terms of 20% in the rural areas and 10% in the urban areas. Although in general, there's a moderate level of knowledge for both rural and urban. But also, if you look in the ones in between, which is high and moderate, they seem to be fairly the same. But if you should look at the high and the lowest. The rural areas have got far lower people, the lowest percentage of people in terms of knowledge of CDF, as compared to the urban areas where the higher percentage of people have very low knowledge of CDF. In terms of communication of CDF, this is from the perspective of the CDF committees. Community public announcements were the most effective means, and the churches actually came second, although it's 9.5, but they came second from 53% from the community public announcements. The least are the National Assembly constituency offices. The door-to-door is 2.5, but also we have traditional leaders also comparatively doing quite well in terms of supporting CDF with 8.9. Radio stations would have expected that they would have been much higher, but they are actually considered less than the traditional leaders by the CDF committees in terms of communication of CDF. In terms of communication from the perspectives of the WDCs, it's almost the same. As you can see, the community public announcements still constitute a lot more, and that is 60.5%. But the radio stations, the traditional leaders are a little bit higher than before, where they're considered to be at 14.4% by the WDC respondents. This is in terms of communication of CDF information. Community participation. This one is quite interesting because if you look at community participation from the community's perspective, the participation is said to be much higher in the rural areas compared to in the urban areas. And this has an historical perspective. If you look at WDCs, who are the main players in terms of in terms of development in Zambia, they were set up in 1973 as part of what is considered as a Village Act, although it's actually the registration and development of villages. This one, if you look at section 14, it actually says that WDCs will only be set up in rural areas. So we've had WDCs since 1973. So this setup has always been the setup which communities in the rural areas have used as a way of communication and a way of development. In the urban areas, we had what we called area development committees. They hardly worked out, and mainly because in the rural areas, people are more communal than in the urban areas. I don't know how many of us here know who our neighbors are. Some of us here, we can stay for 10 years and we don't know who our neighbors are. But in the rural areas, it's not possible. So you can find that in terms of participation in community structures, the rural areas are much better in terms of that participation. So this can explain the differences in rural and urban. In terms of participation, here there's a bit of thing. In the rural areas, you have 20% female participation. In terms of participation between gender, there is 20% participation compared to 25% participation for males. So there's a 5% more male participation in the CDF processes. In terms of education, and this is an interesting one too. If you see, if it was a line graph, it would actually be going down in terms of participation from 37.1% for those who have not been to school, 26.9% to primary school, 21% secondary school, and most of us are at 18%. So if you look at participation in CDF processes from a community perspective, the people who have not gone to school are the ones who participate more in those. And this is what it is. If you look even amongst us, how many of us even know who our zonal leaders are, or even that we actually live within a zone? We're still our councillors, and we're still even the members of the WDC. But in the rural areas, especially, and in the high density areas, there's more participation in such structures because we kind of feel like it is through this participation that we can actually get our voices heard. So that's why the CDF is actually an important component or in terms of democracy and people participation. I think, let me see, Binji. Okay. Okay. You've got nothing to do with me, but why are you here? Okay. In terms of communities responding to the notice of applications for empowerment grants, loan skills, and secondary school board and bursaries is quite low, especially in the rural areas. The other day, I was watching a clip of a council secretary from one of the districts in the Eastern Province, where at one time, one year, there was completely zero application, such that they actually used the funds to buy graders instead. So this actually reflects that in terms of applying for the empowerment grants, loan skills development, and secondary school boarding bursaries, actually this is quite low. Community participation in terms of as per the distribution of participation of application for empowerment grants, skills development, and boards and bursaries, that is at 36% in terms of empowerment grants, 24% in terms of development bursaries, and 28.2% for empowerment loans, and secondary school boarding bursaries, which is quite low at 6.7%. So this is more of why is it low? We still have a lot of, especially girl children who don't have access to education, but they are not accessing this facility. This is community participation, but in between rural and urban for empowerment grants, empowerment loans, secondary boarding schools, and skills development. In the rural areas, you have a higher empowerment grants than in the urban areas, including the empowerment loans are a bit lower, but the lowest in terms of all of them is the school boarding school bursary. As we said, there's very little uptake in this area. Participation in the WDCs. Rural areas, there were 41 respondents. All of them said they participated. In the urban areas, only 82.4% said they participated in the WDC processes concerning CDF. Because WDCs are not set up for CDF. They are actually, they are used for CDF as part of the processes, but there are also other things which they actually do. Bribe-seeking incidences. This was from the communities. These were a total of 475 who applied for grants, skills development, boarding bursaries. Out of those, these 51% had 51, which is 10.7%, had bribe-seeking incident experiences. Which means that they were either solicited or they were offered bribe. In terms of urban and rural, there's very little difference in terms of bribe-seeking incidences. although the rural areas was a little bit high, 11.8 and 10.4 for the urban areas. Bribe incident type for soliciting is 74.4%, bribe offered is 21.6%. Undue influence. This information came from the WDC, CDF committees, and also the contractors. Members of parliament, in terms of undue influence on the CDF processes, were 32.5%, ward councillors at 30.5%, and local authorities at 26.4%. So this is undue influence in terms of on the processes. Forms of corruption, this is my last slide. The highest was political corruption, bribery, and then nepotism and cronyism, which were quite high in the 20s. Binji? So thank you for listening, although it was a little bit rushed, but I hope that you got something which you can discuss later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Wenda.
Wenda, what did you do? I can't get this back in here.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Thank you, Timothy. Thank you, Wenda, again. Although both I and Wenda and Muliro are grey, we were in college together with Wenda nearly 40 years ago. Thank you. So I'll now go to look at the state of bribery.
I think I'll just do that. Timothy, let me just, I can break it.
Now, on the state of bribery, there are basically 4 measures that we use. We use the probability of a bribery experience. We also have incidents of bribery, prevalence of bribery, and frequency of bribery. The first we start with is the probability of a bribery experience. Probability basically is the likelihood of a service provider, public service provider, soliciting or demanding a bribe. And it's computed from the number of interactions individuals or citizens have with a particular public sector institution or selected private sector category. In 2024, the likelihood of a bribery experience or a demand was basically 32.2% of the service-seeking interactions that were there. We had 5,299 service-seeking interactions, and 1,708 were incidents of a bribe demand or bribe solicitation occurred. The lowest probabilities are in Zambia, Public Service Pension Fund, and National Registration Office at 18.2. The highest likelihood of a bribe being demanded or solicited was public health services. The asterisk there means we have to differentiate because we also looked at university teaching hospitals separately and then other public health services. The probability, the likelihood of the bribe being solicited or demanded was 70.5%. Department of Immigration was 55.0%, and Zambia Police Traffic 49.6%. Incidence is basically the number of times a bribe was solicited relative to the total number of observed bribe-seeking incidents in all the service institutions, and there were 29 of them. So this is more like a ranking where were bribes solicited the most. My the slide is not very clear. Anyway, public health services registered the highest incidence at 40.8%, or is it 40.8? Road Transport and Safety Agency 9.7, Zambia Police Other Services 9.2. Now we look at prevalence. Prevalence basically is the number of people that paid bribes relative to the number of the bribe demands that were made. And this was at 52.9%. 9%. The lowest prevalence was in the public health service at 12.5, the Ministry of Infrastructure, Higher Education. Higher prevalences at Zambia Police Traffic, Department of Immigration, Magistrate Courts. I need to explain further in detail here. So when you have a prevalence of, for example, Zambia Police Traffic, 91.2%, what that means that of all the bribes that were solicited or demanded, the likelihood of payment was that 91.2% of the bribes demanded were actually paid. The interesting thing is the lower prevalence. Although the public health sector had the highest bribe-seeking demands, they actually have the lowest bribe pay. I hope that will come out again in the plenary. In terms of frequency, RATSA has the highest frequency when you start doing a comparative with the other institutions, Zambia Police Services, Ministry of Education, and the local authorities. Now, we compare probability and prevalence from the last Bribe Payers Index survey, which was in 2022. What we observe is that the likelihood of a bribe being demanded in 2024 actually went down by 8.1%. But the likelihood of a bribe being paid actually went down by 9.7%. So we're having more bribe-seeking incidents in 2024 compared to 2022, but we are having less bribe-paying incidents in 2024 compared to 2022. Those from research institutions may want to pursue as to why people are paying less and then there are higher demands being made on them. The private sector is the last component of the state of bribery. And in the private sector, the categories we looked were banking, construction, manufacturing, microfinance services, mining, private education, and health services. In terms of bribe demand being made in these categories, it was basically 8.3%, with the highest bribe demand being in mining. Incidents in the private sector, banking had the highest bribe-seeking behaviors, and the least was in health services at 3.8%. In terms of the bribe being paid, of the bribes that were demanded, and basically statistically they were very low, only 2 bribe demands were made in the health services and the 2 were basically paid. Microfinances, 6 bribe-seeking incidents, 4 were paid, and 67.57% when you use percentages. But really at the end of the day, they're quite minimal in terms of bribe paying and bribe seeking incidents in the private sector. I'll skip that one. Now we look at the indices. We use 2 indices basically to come up with an idea of how what the aggregate bribery situation is. And the first is the aggregate bribery index. This one just measures the likelihood of a bribe solicited by a public officer being paid. It uses incidence, prevalence, frequency, which I already intimated earlier when we're looking at the state of bribery. So we look at the 2024 index. In 2024, the aggregate bribery index increased by 5.2 percentage points from 10.1 in 2022 to 15.3 in 2024. And the graph below, my IT people messed up my technology. I'll show you. Anyway, it moved from 10, then we are 10.9, 10.1, and now we are at 15.3. I wish you were looking at my screen here, it's much more beautiful. That's the aggregate bribery index and the trends. We've gone up by 5.2 percentage points. In terms of the weighted scores, we have negatives, Zambia Traffic, Zambia Police Traffic and other services. When we look at 2022 and 2024, basically payment of bribes in a way went down by minus 21.1. Zambia Police Other Services, minus 7.5 traffic sections, ZESCO and Ministry of Lands. The highest increases in health services, NAPSA, PACRA, Ministry of Education, Department of Immigration, and local authorities. Now, we also use another index because the aggregate bribery index is actually being phased out because it doesn't take into account the number of interactions a citizen or individual made with a particular institution. So in 2022, we introduced what is called the service-seeking interaction-based bribery index. Now, this is based on bribery experiences related to the number of individuals that seek a public service in a survey-targeting institution. It measures both the likelihood of either being asked for a bribe or the likelihood of paying a bribe solicited by a public officer during his or her interaction with selected public institutions. The index is generated from basically 3 questions. The first is which selected public institution did the respondent interact with in the preceding 12 months to the survey. The second is, was a bribe asked for or demanded from the respondent? The third question is, did the respondent pay the bribe? So it's an either or index. The index, service-seeking bribery index in 2024 increased by 7.2 percentage points. As in 2022, it was 14.5, in 2024, it's 21.7. There are no percentage point decreases observed in all the target institutions. That is the either or, being asked or paying a bribe. The lowest though, in terms of the change, are more RDA, Ministry of Finance, Public Service Pension Fund, Ministry of Lands, Passport Office, National Registration Office. We see higher increases in RATSA, Judiciary, Zambia Revenue Authority Tax, Department of Immigration, Zambia, and PACRA. Where PACRA, for example, either or being asked to bribe is basically 53.4%. The survey also looks at prevalence of bribery in certain services within particular institutions. And in 2024, we looked at Zambia Police, RATSA, local authorities or councils, Ministry of Education, and Zambia Electric Supply Company. The additional one in 2024 was Invest Teaching Hospital, because the first 5, we looked at them also in 2022. Invest Teaching Hospital is only last year. I hope this is clear. The services for Zambia Police were basically criminal investigation, police bond, other police traffic clearance services, traffic violation enforcement, Interpol, motor vehicle clearance, and victim support services. And when you compare to 2022, the only reduction that is there in terms of bribery experiences, that is either paying a bribe or soliciting a bribe, is basically criminal investigation, which has gone down by 4.2 percentage points, police bond by 11.7 percentage points. This is basically the probability. Traffic, other police clearance, other police clearance has also gone down by 5.2%, and traffic violations also has gone by. This is the asking of a bribe or bribe demand. Now, in terms of bribe payments, the only reduction that is observed or improvement, basically when you compare to 2022, is Interpol motor vehicle clearance, which has gone down by 11.9%. The highest increase in the prevalence of the bribery experience is other police clearance services, criminal investigations, and victim support services. Traffic violation has a 3.4% increase in prevalence. RATSA, in terms of bribe demand, the services that were looked at was driving license, road tax, examination of certificate of fitness, licensing of a public service vehicle, registration of motor vehicle trailer, renewal of driving license, and driving offense enforcement. In terms of bribe demand, when we consider 2022, 2021, 2022, bribe demand only reduced in driving license. Everywhere else, the bribe demand has gone up. In terms of bribe pay, its prevalence, the only reduction in the number of individuals that are paying bribes that are requested for is the renewal of driving license. All others have gone up. The highest increase basically being in examination for certificate of fitness and driving offense enforcement or tax. The next is, I think, local authorities. We also consider local authorities. The services consider property rates, building permits, liquor licensing, basic marriage and death registration, trading licenses and business permits, and vendor licensing. In terms of bribe demands, the only reductions in terms of the actual behavioral aspects of what is being observed is property rates, which has gone down by 14.1%, and building permits by 7.5%. The highest bribe demands compared to 2022 are basically in the vendor licensing and trading license and business permits. When you look at the bribe pay, which is the prevalence now, although we have an improvement in property rates in terms of bribe solicitation, but in terms of bribe pay, it's actually gone up. Although the highest bribe pay is actually best marriage death registration and vendor licensing, which has actually gone up by 50%. We also, of the other institutions, the last one I'm presenting in this is basically the University Hospital, and this shows the bribe probability, which is the bribe seeking behaviors or incidences, and the bribe pay. You know that the cancer hospital actually has the highest bribe seeking demands, the eye hospital the lowest. But at the same time, the cancer hospital actually has the lowest bribe pay. The highest bribe pay is actually women and newborn hospital, while the cancer hospital actually has the lowest bribe pay, although it has the highest bribe demands that are occurring here. The last part is when we also look at the demographic dimensions of basically bribery experiences in that particular survey year. When you look at the rural-urban dichotomy in terms of probability and prevalence, you know that individuals in rural areas actually ask for bribes more and they pay bribes more than in urban areas. Urban rural areas is 38.6% bribe demands, urban areas 30.9% bribe demands, bribe pay rural areas 61.5%, whereas in urban areas is 50.7%. From a gender perspective, women face more bribe demands in terms of bribe solicitation, but luckily they pay less. Men face less bribe demands, but they are always the ones who are in a hurry to pay at 59.9%. The women always negotiate, that we know for a fact. We look at the difference with respect to education. This is bribe pay. The people that pay the most bribes are actually, unfortunately, those who have not been to school, and also tragically, those who have some college, tertiary education and secondary school. The primary level people are in the middle. In terms of bribe pay, it's basically paying the bribe that's been solicited. It's the usual trend that we've seen in every survey year. I think the anti-corruption agencies, stakeholders will have to start looking at this seriously. Because the private sector transportation and self-employed transportation are also quite high. I mean, they are 80%, 72. And tragically, also individuals in the private public sector also tend to pay the most bribes. Bribe size, basically the most frequent or dominant bribe size is less or equal to 500 quantum. It's the same in rural and urban areas, although in rural areas 500 to 1,000 and of course 1,000 to 2,000 are quite low compared to the urban areas. Male, female is basically the same. Less or equal to 500 still dominates. Now, we also looked at the bribe size with respect to the selected services, the public institutions we interrogated. If you look at Zambia Police, the bribe size, although it's less or equal to 500 in most cases, the higher ones are in fire clearance, police work at 48%, and criminal investigations at 40%. That's why you get greater than 501 question. In ransom, although bribe sizes of less or equal to 500 are common, for driving licenses where there's an exception, what dominates in driving licensing is basically bribe sizes of greater than 500 kwacha. And local authorities, again, although you may not hear, there's a bit of a difference. The bribe sizes of less or equal to 500 are mostly in all of them: CDF services, property rates, registration of beds, trading licenses, and vendor licensing. But the exceptions are building permits, where bribe sizes of greater than 500 kwacha are dominant, and also liquor licensing. I think I understand that. People have their whiskey anyway. And then trading licenses and permits. UTH was also included in this analysis to try and understand where people are paying more. The dominant one is less or equal to 500 kwacha. But unfortunately, you will notice that for cancer hospital, actually it has the most prevalent in terms of more than 500 kwacha compared to the other hospitals within your UTH. So who bears the most brands and why, and what kind of brands do they bear when they refuse to pay a bribe? The rural areas where they refuse to pay a bribe, basically the majority, 91.6% indicate that the service was unnecessarily delayed, 8.4% indicated that the service was denied. Whereas in other areas, service delayed is still a majority. But the second one is that I think after shouting, the service is often given promptly at 32.0%. That's the dichotomy we see in terms of the severity. Now, why do people, before I jump, I think there's always a gender perspective. Not much difference from the gender perspective. Service is often necessarily delayed, and in terms of service denied, comparatively more males suffer that consequence than females. Service are given promptly, again, more females are given promptly, given extraordinarily faster, as than men. I think this is always after shouting. I'm sorry to say that. Now, why do people pay bribes? When you look at urban and rural areas, in rural areas, most people pay bribes to avoid penalties at 50%. Lack of information is at 25, and fear of service denial is at also 25. In other areas, most people pay bribes to avoid delays. And I'm sorry, I don't know where they're always rushing to here, because that's all it is about. You're delaying me, I'm in a hurry. So there's a bit of a difference. But the dominant, when you compare the two, people pay bribes either to avoid penalties or basically to avoid delays. Other areas, quite a good number also pay bribes to avoid penalties, which is at 22.2%. The last component is on corruption knowledge, reporting, and oversight, and we try to, not the one by last actually. Now, in terms of individuals knowing what corruption is, we still establish the same. Quite a good number actually know what corruption is, 93.9%. Only 5.4% do not know what corruption is. I mean, in terms of the gradation of the knowledge, actually, the more educated you are, the higher the knowledge. If you're tertiary, if you're not been to school, the lower the knowledge of what corruption is. With respect to what most think corruption is, the most dominant is bribery and kickbacks, abuse of authority of office, failure to follow rules or procedures, and the least known is actually sextortion and nepotism. That is never considered to be corruption. In terms of corruption reporting, this is more, do people know where to report corruption? In rural areas, 55.6% no, urban areas 61.7% no, 44.4%
4% in rural areas do not know where to report corruption, 38.3% in urban areas do not know where to report corruption. We also asked which institutions they know where they can report corruption, and the most common that came up was the Anti Corruption Commission, who are overwhelming percentage, and then Zambia Police. Now, awareness of the online anonymous whistleblower system is very low at 11.8%, and this is understandable, as Timothy indicated. It was just introduced last year in April, you mentioned. But we did try to find out whether members of the public are aware. In terms of the rural-urban dichotomy, awareness is comparatively higher in urban areas than in rural areas. That's 7.3, 13.3% in urban areas. The last but the least component is where we look at anti-corruption interventions that have been put in place and bribery experiences. Now, in the target public decisions and the survey, the interventions that have been put in place are code of ethics, display of anti-corruption messages, service charters, complaint handling mechanisms, e-payment systems, and whistleblower protection. The most dominant anti-corruption intervention implemented are basically code of ethics and display of anti-corruption messages. So we were interrogated to see how these relate to the probability and prevalence of bribery. When I look at probability of bribery, in all these institutions where those anti-corruption interventions are put, all of them, the bribe demand is lower than the aggregate bribe demand. Although the highest bribe demand to us is more where there are e-payments, although still lower than the national aggregate, because the national aggregate is based at 32.2, but e-payment at 30.2. So all institutions that have those mechanisms, there's less bribe-seeking incidents occurring. In terms of prevalence, it's the reverse. There's actually more bribe-paid incidents occurring, and the highest bribe-paid incidents are actually in e-payment and where there are service charters. The lowest bribe-paid incidents are basically in whistleblower protection, but they're all about the national aggregate of 52.9%. We looked at selected services to try and understand further what is happening here. So in Zambia Police, we looked at traffic violation enforcement because they have a semi-e-payment system. When you look at bribe-seeking incidents in rural, basically 71.4%. In urban areas, it's 44.7%. There's a very huge difference. During plenary, I hope somebody will touch this, but basically, this could just explain that e-payment systems have not penetrated rural Zambia. And you can talk to SC later. We also looked at RATSA, review of driving licenses, and you will note that in terms of bribe-seeking behaviors, again, rural areas, despite you being able to renew your driver's license online, rural areas still has a high percentage of bribe-seeking incidents, and urban areas it's actually fallen drastically, is 42.9%. We also need to look at vehicle road licensing, what is called road tax, which you can now buy online. I mean, the number of interactions in rural areas were quite minimal, 9, but of those 9, 4 of them were asked for bribe. In urban areas, there were 86 incidents, 6 self-seeking incidents, and only 20 basically had a bribe-seeking incident, which is 23.3%. Again, you can say that these e-payment systems or this government portal where people do this seem to actually be more effective in urban areas than in rural areas. Of course, we know there's no internet connectivity in most of our rural Zambia. The last part is the application of good governance indicators. This is the last part of the survey where we look at how the government performs in terms of applying selected good governance indicators. This is basically participation, transparency, accountability, rule of law, and control of corruption. The index basically measures the overall good governance on a scale of 1 to 0. Basically, 1 is very high, and then if you go down towards less than 0.21, because 0 is very low. The questions that I asked, basically, I think for understanding governance index is on participation. Basically, we ask do citizens or individuals actively voice their concerns and engage in government, with government representatives. Are citizens or individuals able to access information regarding any decision taken by public officials? Are all public office decision makers answering to the public and institutional stakeholders? Do law enforcement agencies function impartially? Rule of law? Does the judiciary function impartially? Recognize the supremacy of the law and the rule of law? Is the government doing enough to combat bribery and corruption at institutional and policy level, that is control of corruption? In the 2024 Governance Index, the highest application of the governance indicators was basically in participation, rule of law, and control of corruption. Transparency and accountability was moderate. The overall rating was moderate at 0.59. We must understand, let me just go back here. Oops. Techno. No, come in. Running out of time. Okay. I'm being told I'm running out of time. I don't like you, Timothy. Let me just do this comparative analysis here now. If we look at 2022 and 2024, the 2024 shows that we've had improvements in application of participation, transparency, rule of law, and then a downward trend in accountability and control of corruption. However, the overall index has gone up when you compare 2022-2024 by 6.0%. Yeah, okay. I think I'll just end up with one emerging issue and recommendations that were made, because this young man tells me I run out of time. I think for us as a consulting team, what is most critical and what we need to start understanding, I hope this is very clear. Wenda, can you read there? There, the red ones.
The red
Yeah.
one, and the text social norms
Yeah.
process.
Okay, fine. I just want to. You see, what is of more concerning at a cross-cutting level is that individuals that pay bribes that are solicited actually know what corruption is. That is what is a very worrying. So we should start interrogating, why is this the case? Why do people that know bribes pay? And that's why we're saying we actually now need to go into more, start looking at behavioral research. Maybe that way we'll try and start understanding. Because we have to ask yourself, do people pay bribes because others are expecting them to, or they believe others are paying bribes? That's the question we need to start interrogating. Because the bribe-seeking behaviors, if you note it from the interventions being put in place, are actually likely going down. But you see, those interventions are not going to address the likelihood of somebody paying a bribe. They will just, it's because there are two interfaces here. The bribe seeking is more the service provider. Bribe pay is the service seeker and service provider, so the question is twofold. So if we reduce bribe seeking behaviors with those interventions, but people are still paying the bribe, then there must be something we are missing. And I critically believe what we are missing is understanding human behaviors. Do they pay bribes because they believe that's what others do? Or do they pay bribes because society expects them to pay bribes? Thank you very much, Anna. Why? You don't want my laptop? Oh, crazy you.
Please, another round of applause to an elaborate presentation of this report. A lot of questions. How allow me at this juncture to invite the chairperson, Anti Corruption Commission, to
which also have some challenges.
Can I just click it?
Yeah, my cousin was shot as well. Yeah, my cousin who was here just before me was slightly shorter, so I have to adjust the microphones. The guest of honor, sir, the Secretary to the Cabinet, Mr. Patrick Kangwa. The Permanent Secretary is present. Deputy Permanent Secretary is present. The President, Transparency International Zambia. Senior government officials present. The representatives from the private sector, civil society, and the church, members of the press, and ladies and gentlemen. The launch of this 2024 Zambia Bribe Payers Index survey report we are witnessing today is a culmination of the joint effort between Transparency International Zambia and the Anti Corruption Commission. The fight against corruption requires concerted efforts from all stakeholders. It is for this reason that the two institutions have been collaborating since 2012 in conducting the Zambia Bribe Payers Index survey to assess the level of bribery in the country. I therefore wish to extend my gratitude to Transparency International Zambia for its role in the fight against corruption. It is my sincere hope that this partnership will continue to flourish in years to come. Let me also extend my sincere gratitude to the consultants for the immense work that has gone towards the production of this report. The Zambia Bribe Payers Index is an important measure of bribery because it mainly captures people's real experiences of payment of bribes, as well as the demands for bribes as they seek services in public institutions. Further, the Zambia Bribe Payers Index survey findings are crucial in formulating appropriate and targeted anti-corruption policies and interventions and measuring their success. Guests of honor, ladies and gentlemen, as has been alluded to earlier, the 2024 Zambia Bribe Payers Index survey focused on the implementation of the Constituency Development Fund, CDF. The findings of the survey, as has been highlighted by the consultant, have revealed that people's perceptions of the most occurring forms of corruption in the implementation of the Constituency Development Fund are political corruption, bribery, and nepotism or favoritism in the selection of beneficiaries. In addition, as the findings have shown, the aggregate bribery index has increased from 10.1% in 2022 to 15.3% in 2024, implying that the likelihood of an individual paying a bribe when seeking a service has increased. This result is of major concern to the Commission, as corruption can limit government efforts aimed at decentralizing critical services and taking development to all communities across the country. It is, however, gratifying to note that the findings also indicate that the probability of a bribery experience has decreased in institutions where the Commission has put anti-corruption interventions. In order to ensure transparency and accountability in the implementation of constituency development fund projects, the Commission has actively been participating in the evaluation processes for the procurement of constituency development fund projects. However, the Commission's participation has been limited as we are not present in all the 116 districts. In order to address this challenge, the Commission plans to open more district offices in Sesheke, Kasempa, Mbala, and Chingola. The Commission will continue implementing corruption prevention efforts to ensure that the gains made in good governance are sustained. Further, the Commission will continue investigating reports of suspected corrupt practices in the implementation of CDF projects. Those found wanting will be prosecuted as a deterrent to would-be offenders. In addition, the Commission will work towards implementing anti-corruption interventions focused on behavioral change to augment the enforcement measures currently in place. I strongly believe that these and many other initiatives will play a key role in reducing the occurrence of bribery in the country. I therefore wish to urge all institutions, both public and private, to put in place anti-bribery mechanisms that will prevent corruption in their respective institutions. I wish to take this opportunity to thank you all for coming to this launch and to thank the guest of honor for gracing the launch of the 2024 Zambia Bribe Payers Index Survey Report. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Justice Abaundi, Chairperson of the Anti Corruption Commission Board. We quickly go into a very short panel discussion, just about 10 minutes, to just get a feel of what is going on in the anti-corruption process. And allow me to invite the moderator.
Is that corruption or theft?
Mr. Amanda to please come up and also invite representative from TIZ, the ACC as well, and the consultants to join in the panel discussion. Mr. Talent, TIZ, and Mr. Sakana, Anti Corruption Commission.
I don't know if I can respond.
How do I do this?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mono. Thank you very much, Mr. Mono. Secretary to Cabinet, Mr. Patrick Kangwa, Honorable Justice E. Hamaundu, retired chairperson for the board for the Anti Corruption Commission, the Director General for the Anti Corruption Commission, Mrs. Daphne Chabu, the Chapter President for Transparency International Zambia, Mrs. Priscilla Chanda Chikonde. Or may you allow me to ride on the protocols that were established by earlier speakers. We are now at the part of the program where we will be having a panel discussion, and joining me is Mr. Mtale Raymond from Transparency International Zambia, Mr. Sakala from the Anti Corruption Commission, and of course the main man for today, Mr. Mbinji Mfalo, who is our consultant for the ZBPI survey for 2024. We were supposed to be joined by somebody from the Ministry of Local Government and Housing, who are the implementing ministry for the CDF fund. But due to other national commitments, they did inform us at the 11th hour that they will be unable to join us today. May I just give a bit background to why we're here. The Zambia Bribery Payers Index, ZBPI survey, is a corruption experimental survey which measures the probability and prevalence of bribery experiences in selected public institutions and also selected categories within the public sector. The survey is jointly undertaken by Transparency International Zambia, TIZ, and the Anti Corruption Commission, SEC, covering 20 districts across the 10 provinces of Zambia. The 2024 ZBPI results indicate that the aggregate bribery index, which measures the likelihood of individuals paying a bribery, was solicited by a public officer, has increased, as was rightly stated earlier by the speakers, including Jaja Maondo, by 5.2% points, from 10.1 in 2022 to 15.3 in 2024. This is concerning as it indicates a rise in bribery amidst the numerous policy initiatives that are aimed at tackling the corruption problem in Zambia. This panel discussion will try to discuss deeper into the results in order to provide a context to the likely implication of these results, as well as to identify solutions or recommendations for key anti-corruption actors. I will start probably the panel discussion with Mr. Mbinji, that in terms of the 2024 ZBPI results showing the probability of bribery experience in targeted districts institution is at 32.2%. Would you please explain to the audience what you mean by probability of a bribery experience and how the same differs from prevalence of bribery experience?
Thank you, Mose. What I already did. The probability is basically the bribe demand, bribe solicitation. Prevalence is the bribe pay. But I think I'll use this opportunity, I hope, Mose, since I've explained that. I think for me, the 2024 survey has just brought a different dimension that I think years back we used to look at. You see, the demand, which is the solicitation, cannot exist without the supply, which is the bribe pay. And I think for years we've been more looking at the demand side of things, because even our anti-corruption interventions are basically trying to curb the demand. I think perhaps now is that we should start asking ourselves, how do we reduce the supply? That is for me really, I think the takeaway from this report is basically the supply has suddenly shot up. Everybody is paying a bribe now. The question is, how do we then contain that? How do we stop that supply? Raymond, I know you want to answer something. He doesn't.
I was going to pick up. Thanks, Mbinji, with that response.
Yeah.
Raymond, from the TIZ point of view, you recently launched the 2024 Corruption Perception Index, CPI, which indicated that the public sector corruption has reduced in Zambia, as CPI increased from 37 over 100 to 39 over 100. How do you explain this seemingly contradiction between the CPI readings and the ZBPI results, which indicate that bribery is on the rise?
Thanks, Muzi. When we received the first draft report, I was alarmed by the scope, and already I started panicking that we struggle to explain the seeming contradiction. But later on, through analyzing the report further and discussions with Mindy, I actually called Mindy, and we had a very heated debate over the same. The issue is simple. One, when you look at the CPI, its focus is different from the ZBPI. The CPI focuses on a number of corruption types. It focuses on political corruption, it focuses on procurement corruption, it focuses on the rule of law, it focuses on various aspects that contribute to driving corruption. Whereas the Zambia Bribe Payers Index zeroes in on one type of corruption, which is bribery. That's number one. Number two, CPI is sector focused. The last CPI focused on climate change. Other CPIs are focused on the education sector, health sector. And in those sectors, they interrogate the different aspects of corruption, different types of corruption. Whereas Zambia Bribe Payers Index focuses on individual institutions and zeroes in on what? Bribery. And it interrogates, one, the possibility of service seekers encountering bribery. It interrogates the possibility of institutions soliciting bribery. But I think the question we should ask ourselves is this. For us to interrogate the status of corruption in the country, do we need to rely on the CPI alone? The answer is no. For us to interrogate the status of corruption in Zambia, do we need to interrogate the ZBPI alone? No. I think we've been having conversations with internal as GIZ, but also with ACC on the possibility of coming up with a state of corruption study that will give us a comprehensive picture of the status of corruption in the country. That way, we'll be able to actually know the drivers of corruption, know the red flags of corruption, and therefore come up with effective interventions to deal with corruption. And this question will not arise. So to answer the question, there is no contradiction because the scope, the focus of the two studies are different.
Thank you very much, Samtale. I must say that even now with your explanation, I'm still in that state of confusion as you earlier were when you first saw the report. Maybe now we move on to Mr. Sakala from the Anti Corruption Commission. The collaboration between your institution and TIZ in producing the ZBPI report for years now has been, I think, commendable. I just wanted to know, how does the SEC use this information from at least the 2024 ZBPI survey in advocating its work and mission?
Thank you so much. Indeed, we've had very good collaboration with the Transparency International Zambia. I must say that the results of the PPI helps the Commission a lot. As you can see from the presentation of the results, the survey is able to pinpoint areas or institutions that are susceptible to bribery and corruption. Hence, this helps the Commission to prioritize its resources in areas that come out from the survey results as areas that are highly susceptible to corruption. For example, if there are high incidences of bribery in the area of licensing and procurement, so it means that the Commission will prioritize its resources and focus the attention and the anti-corruption measures in the area of licensing and procurement. Apart from that, the results also help us to measure the effectiveness of our anti-corruption interventions. This indeed is the periodic research, so we are able to track the level of bribery against our interventions. So if there are high levels of instances of bribery, say in certain public institutions, from what in success years, we're able to tell if our interventions are actually useful. Apart from that, this is empirical and evidence-based research. So it helps us also as Anti-Corruption Commission come up with strategies that are evidence-based and well-researched strategies. But apart from that, we have the public education function. So the results of the survey also raises public awareness and members of the public to just appreciate how serious incidences of bribery and corruption are. And so we focus our attention in order to build the critical mass in as far as incidents of corruption is concerned in public service delivery.
Well said, Mr. Sakala. Just as a follow-up to your responses, earlier in the morning we were told about the objectives of the 2024 ZBPI, which is to explore the extent of bribery and other forms of corruption in the implementation of the Constituency Development Fund program in selected constituencies across the country. In line with the 2024 ZBPI survey theme, which is corruption in the decentralization process, with a focus on the CDF implementation, what strategies, if any, does the Commission have to prevent corruption in the implementation of the CDF program?
Yes, so in terms of implementation of anti-corruption measures in the CDF funds, the corruption under the Corruption Prevention Department has a fully fledged program. Last year in 2024, we were able to conduct integrity checks in the implementation of the Constituency Development Fund. So we were able to look at the CDF guidelines, the CDF Act, and to go out in the field to conduct surveys to just appreciate the conformity and the adherence of the CDF guidelines. Apart from that, as a commission, we have been very instrumental to sit on evaluation committees that try to evaluate a lot of CDF projects. We are working very closely with the Ministry of Rural Government and Rural Development in the collaborative effort to try and train and sensitize the local authorities, council secretaries, and also various structures that are involved in the spearheading the implementation of CDF. And we are continuing this effort this year, because last year we were able to cover 5 provinces. So with the results of this survey, this will already complement to our efforts where we are trying to cover the remaining provinces this year.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sakala. Maybe back to you, Mr. Mutale. The 2024 CPI index, that is the Corruption Perception Index, I found that most occurring forms of corruption in the CDF program implementation are political corruption, which stood at 27.5%, bribery, which stood at 23.8%, nepotism or cronism, which stood at 23.7%. I know earlier you did attempt to define the terms relating to corruption. I was just wondering if you may try to restate some of these types of corruption and highlight what stakeholders can do to combat corruption in the implementation of the CDF program.
Thanks once again. So there are three types of corruption that are highlighted in relation to CDF: political corruption, bribery, nepotism, cronyism. Now, before I respond, in 2022, I was approached by a friend that I needed to join them in forming a cooperative because I will use Nyanja. He said, "Chaope now." In terms of CD. And that story speaks to how political corruption is actually thriving. Because when I asked further questions, what we needed to do is merely form a cooperative, other things fall in place. And it tells you the extent to which some officers are able to manipulate processes, procedures, just to create that favorable environment for their friends to actually tap on national resources in an illegal way. Favoritism, nepotism, they are for me offsprings of political corruption in one way or the other. And I think that we need to pay attention to this. I don't think it's important to define bribery. I believe everyone here understands what bribery is. But for me, the question is, what are we learning from this report? I've always argued that the CPI, ZBPI, even the Auditor General's report, fake report findings, that is maybe the first stage. But at this stage, it's still very difficult to pinpoint where the problem is. I think Benji asked the question, how do we deal with the supply side? Because as a researcher, the ZBPI does not give you clear points where we need to interrogate. And I think we need to challenge ourselves that we need to do another level of assessments to go down to the procedural steps, interrogate drivers, process steps, interrogate the drivers. That way we'll be making solid recommendations to government of what they need to do to deal with corruption. This idea of saying political will, define political will in the fight against corruption, still general. I think we need to be practical. And for me, what I'm taking from this is that we need to create another layer where we go deeper in the findings and pinpoint in the processes of service delivery, which areas are prone to corruption, what do we exactly need to do, and deal with corruption in that manner. It's a collective effort, but we need to go in that direction.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mtale. Mbindi, I get back to you as the last question now. During the presentation of your reports, I got the sense that we hurried you as you were making recommendations. I think it was towards the end, maybe in the interest of time. I was just wondering if you may restate some of the key recommendations that are very, I think, pertinent to today's discussion.
Thank you, Moses. But I'll pass. But I think Raymond and I are speaking the same language, unfortunately. We always chat informally. So basically what he's saying is more or less what I wanted to amplify on.
As regards to the recommendations.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, my panelists, for your insightful contribution to today's discussion. Maybe back to you, Mr. Mono.
Thank you.
Yeah, we need to talk. We go. Yeah, we go. We go.
Thank you so much for those insights into the report and your responses to help guide in measures what the President concerns brought out in the report.
Yeah, this is it. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen,
This is my.
it is my singular honor and privilege to invite our guest of honor, the Secretary to the Cabinet, Mr. Patrick Kangwa, to now give his main speech. The guest of honor.
Do I do it? Please, hello. Yeah, okay. The Board Chairperson, Anti Corruption Commission, Honorable Justice Evans Amaundu. The President, Transparency International Zambia. The Director General, Anti Corruption Commission. Representatives of cooperating partners, senior government officials, members of staff from the Anti Corruption Commission, members of staff from the Transparency International Zambia, members of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Even at breakfast and you can't answer, good morning. Next time, DG, we don't give breakfast. Before I start making my remarks, if you take that report and see where it says public service, you put Patrick Kangwa, then you'll be able to tell how I'm feeling here, being the head of the public service. It is indeed an honor and one that gives me great pleasure to officiate at this momentous occasion, the launch of the Zambia Bribe Payers Index ZBPI report for 2024. This report is not merely a document. It is a call to action. It is an invitation for all stakeholders, government, private sector, civil society, and the entire public to work together in creating a culture of integrity and accountability. Ladies and gentlemen, corruption remains one of the major obstacles to Zambia's social and economic development. It diverts the much-needed resources from public services. It increases the cost of doing business, and it erodes public confidence in our institutions. The launch of this Bribe Payers Index report, therefore, provides us with valuable insights into the nature, frequency, and impact of bribery in Zambia's public and private sectors. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to commend the Anti Corruption Commission and the Transparency International Zambia for the long-standing partnership in conducting the ZBPI survey. I am aware that the two institutions, one public and the other private, have been working together to produce the ZBPI report since 2012, and they have continued working together. This partnership therefore underscores the mutual coexistence that is possible between the state and the private sector, in this case, civil society. This is as it should be. Collaboration of the two institutions is not just limited to production of the ZBPI report,
but extends to other anti-corruption efforts, such as sensitization of various stakeholders on matters of corruption. Such collaboration resonates well with the spirit behind the national policy of anti-corruption, which is aimed at strengthening collaboration between law enforcement agencies and civil society, among others. Ladies and gentlemen, recently, Zambia's efforts in the fight against corruption earned accolades in the 2024 Transparency International Corruption Perception Index, where Zambia scored our best ever, a score of 39 in 2024, way above our 8th National Development Plan target of 37 for the same year. This shows that our fight against corruption is not in vain, but to a larger extent, achieving the necessary results. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2024 ZBPI report, however, shows that the aggregate bribery index, which reflects the likelihood of an individual paying a bribe solicited by a public officer, increased from 10.1% in 2022 to 15.3% in 2024. This is an increase of 5.2%. Indeed, this makes sad reading, and as government, I can assure you, we will introduce interventions to arrest this worrying scenario. It should be noted that despite that downward trend in the aggregate bribery index, a number of improvements are also notable in the 2024 ZBPI report. Comparatively, in 2024, the Zambia Police Service scored 11.9% less in prevalence of a bribery experience in Interpol and motor vehicle clearance services compared to 2022. Further, in 2024, Road Transport and Safety Agency, RATSA, recorded a 6% decrease in prevalence of a bribery experience in renewal of driving licenses compared to 2022. Additionally, prevalence of a bribery experience in the Ministry of Education in 2024 vis-a-vis seeking a secondary school place decreased by 5.5% compared to 2022. Lastly, Zambia Electricity Supply Company in 2024 scored a 14.5% decrease in prevalence of a bribery experience in faults reporting compared to 2022. Distinguished guests, as already explained by the consultant, my friend Benji Mfalo, the findings of the 2024 ZBPI are not at odds with the Corruption Perception Index, but rather complement each other in the sense that they are a confirmation that as a government, we have done well in some areas in the fight against corruption. However, as the case often is, there are other areas we need to pay more attention to if the fight is to be holistic, and that is the desire of the New Dawn government. Therefore, as head of a public service, I want to mention that the report will continue to serve as a vital instrument in Zambia's efforts to combat corruption, providing data-driven insights to guide policy and the much-needed reforms to curb corruption between those entrusted with the responsibility of dispensing public services and the service seeker. Ladies and gentlemen, government remains committed to strengthening anti-corruption mechanisms and promoting a culture of integrity. While progress has been made, sustained efforts are needed to ensure long-term success in eradicating corruption from all sectors of society. I am aware that we have, through CDF, made a lot of progress in terms of decentralization. But as we did decentralization, I've been in decentralization the last 30 years, we knew that when you decentralize and you take functions to the districts and the lower levels, you equally decentralize corruption and bribery. It follows. Because whereas one group of people used to do the corruption in Lusaka to buy thousands of desks, we dismantled that corruption and we took it to 156 points. So we spread the corruption. But the beauty of decentralizing is that in some cases, there'll be minimum or zero corruption. In other cases, there'll be medium to very high corruption. But the beauty we find ourselves in is we can now compare who's doing well, who's doing badly. And we're able to see who's improving and who's not improving. So, Chair and the DG, we need to continue discussing how we decentralize our interventions as well. We must make sure we get where these things are happening. So just to assure you, I was talking with the DG that we must look at the treasury authorities and the creation of these offices, because there's a lot of resources we're taking down there. We must look at what's happening on the ground. I also want to speak. I noticed my permanent secretary and the entire Ministry of Local Government is not there, but I am here. So we will have to do some source searching as local government, because CDF is not going anywhere. Not even corruption will stop us taking the resources to the people, closest to the people, giving an opportunity for the people to make their decisions. We're going to make sure as government that we work very closely with the Anti Corruption Commission, TIZ, all civil society cooperating partners to make sure CDF works and we stop the corruption, or at least we reduce it to a level which is manageable. I wish to urge all heads of ministries, departments, and spending agencies to utilize the 2024 ZBPI report to enhance their efforts in the fight against corruption. I have directed my office to call a meeting for this report to be presented to all permanent secretaries together with the CPI, so that we agree on how we're going to make sure that next year, this time, we have negatives everywhere, that we will have dropped all activities. We can do it. And I'm grateful, Benji, that you brought out the issue of demand and supply. And I think that's the homework we have. On my side, demand, I must do everything I can. And I can assure all of you personally that we're going to have a lot of action this year in terms of the demand side. We have to, we have no choice. We've got the service charters. We have to make sure people know they have a right to get a service. Because if they do, we will help. Instead of paying for it, come back and claim, this is my service. You're supposed to give this service to me within 2 days. Why haven't you given it to me? I'll go and report. And my office is open. I have time for anyone reporting cases of people not responding to their work. But I think I agree, demand and supply. We have to work both on the public service side and on the public side. We have to intervene on both sides. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my singular honor and privilege to declare the 2024 ZBPI report officially launched. I thank you and may God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Secretary to the Cabinet, for those encouraging words on and commitment to address corruption in the public service. and for continued support to the Anti Corruption Commission. And so to symbolically launch this report, I invite the Secretary Cabinet Table, the Chair, the DG, and the President TIZ to please come in front for the report to be presented. May I request that they come through up here. No, it's okay. Yeah.
Because you said it's not doing it.
Yeah, it's okay. Traditional dances. board members from TIZ to also join the cooperative partners. We are taking pictures. And then we directed them Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We will now request the Aizabot to step down and go to the reports. And that was the climax of our event today. We have come to the end of the program. Again, sincere thanks to the testimony, the chairperson, Anti Corruption Commission, the DG, the President TIZ, indeed all senior government officials present, and cooperative partners for having come to this event. And to you all, members of the audience and members of staff, HCC, TIZ. We shall now be abstaining to sing the national anthem.
This case of putting the
Proud and free, land of work and joy in unity, victors in the struggle for their right. We want freedom's fight. Oh, strong and free, Africa is our motherland. Fashioned with a blessed by God's hand. Let us go a people, join as one. Brothers under the sun. Oh, strong and free. One land and one nation is our pride. Dignity and peace is Zambia's right. Like one holy eagle in its sky. Zambia, praise to thee, O one.
So many praise be to God. Praise, praise, let's remember skies. Zambia, praise to you. Oh, so Father, we thank you for this morning. We thank you for bringing us to this occasion. Lord Jesus Christ, we have learned about the challenges that this nation faces regarding corruption. And through the wisdom and your grace, we ask that you guide us to see how best we can help this country. We challenge each one of us that we really know in refusing to give bribes, in challenging those that demand more, but each time we will remain citizens with integrity and will always work professionally in all areas of service. As we go in this event, be with us, so the Holy Spirit to help you and purpose, so that we continue the work. Jesus Christ, the Lord and Savior, we pray. Amen. We thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, who remain standing as we allow the place of honor and to go to now.